Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a realm gentler than a swooning settee, yet somehow far, far tougher. The everyday existence of Victorian ladies, that's correct. While your spine relaxes on a modern mattress, we're about to slide sideways into a universe of stays tighter than your email folder, social conventions more intricate than your latest group message, and standards so elevated they make your relatives seem practically reasonable. If you've ever felt swamped by household chores, criticized by strangers, or wounded by the gentle cruelty of your husband wanting you to beam more often, well done. You belong here completely. Before we get secured in an outfit with more clasps than a space shuttle, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Do this only if you truly enjoy the content I share with you. Then leave a comment letting me know the hour and location you are viewing from. Now, dim the illumination, switch on your fan for that genuine haunted house ambiance, and let's get you ready. Pause and draw a breath. Have you ever really thought about how Victorian women spent their typical days? Was tasteless custard their only form of sustenance? Exactly how long did the routine of getting dressed consume? And did anyone ever admit they were having trouble breathing? How did they find the time to read when they had 17 calling cards demanding a reply before the morning meal? What did their physical fitness regime consist of? Was it lugging a fainting couch up the stairs or warding off overly eager male visitors? Were they genuinely devoted to needlework, or was it simply a polite way to avoid having conversations with their own kin? Very good. You have just woken up in the year 1875. You're wearing a ruffled nightgown. You can hear the sounds of coal being delivered outside, and there is a high likelihood you will be criticized for blinking too loudly before noon. Wish you luck. You awaken in a bed piled so high with blankets you briefly suspect you are being suffocated gradually by a well-meaning family member. The fire in your hearth went out hours ago, and the air is sharp enough to crystallize your ambitions and dreams. Welcome to a Victorian morning where getting out of bed is a victory, and your first decision is whether to ring for the maid or just hope she's already standing by with tea and disapproval. Let's set the scene. You are nestled in a four-post bed draped with sufficient fabric to cover a modest venue for dancing. You are lying flat on a mattress filled with horsehair, goose feathers, or, if your luck has run out, something that was once hay and now only smells of regret. Above you hangs a heavy velvet canopy that blocks not just the sunlight but also any lingering hope you had of being an early riser. You are, in essence, sleeping within the most excessively engineered pillow fort in all of history. There is no automated alarm device. Instead, you are awakened by a concert of sounds specific to a Victorian home. The distant noise of coal being poured into a receptacle, the quiet sound of a maid meticulously entering your space, and the muffled thud of your own guilt for staying up until midnight reading Charlotte Bronte beneath the covers. Perhaps you are lucky and someone has reignited the warmth. Or perhaps you are already mentally drafting your elegant yet firm complaint about cold feet in the living area. You contemplate burrowing deeper for a moment, but you recognize what lies ahead. The day will not stop for you, and neither will your societal responsibilities. The atmosphere is so cold your breath emerges in small puffs, and you briefly consider inventing modern heating just to avoid leaving the warmth. But this is the Victorian age, so your only recourse is to reach out for the bell pull. You give a tug to a decorative cord hanging conveniently beside your bed, which, upon being pulled, signals the housemaid that it's time to begin the day's complex performance. The maid appears with a quiet look of judgment in her flawlessly starched cap, carrying a tray holding weak tea, a meagre piece of toast, and the subtle hope that you won't require the chamber pot today. She immediately pulls back the heavy drapes, admitting the glorious British daylight. It's grey, muted, and slightly moist, like being gently roused by a mass of cloud. You are now exposed to the external world, or at least to your neighbour's gardener, who is either pruning the shrubs, or more probably, listening closely for material for gossip. The next phase in the morning ordeal is the routine of the warming vessel. Not the enjoyable kind. This is the Victorian container for heated water, recently filled from the kitchen boiler and encased in fabric. It has kept your feet at a comfortable 32 degrees Fahrenheit all night and must now be clumsily transferred back to the maid, who will exchange it for a fresh one for tonight's rest. Try to avoid making eye contact. You both understand the procedure. You swing your legs over the edge, instantly regretting it as your soles meet the chilled surface. The absence of modern central heating means your toes have just made contact with what Victorian builders termed charming original floorboards, and what you think of as a gamble with frostbite. If you are affluent, a worn rug might be present below your feet. If not, you are experiencing the historical equivalent of a plunge into ice water. Getting dressed remains a distant source of fear. First, you must face the infamous morning purification ritual, a jug of water which was warmed when the maid brought it approximately 30 minutes prior. It now rests frigid on the washstand. You quickly splash your face, gasping like a fish stranded on a glacier, and dry yourself with a piece of cloth so stiff it could likely function as a baking tray. Cleanliness, in the Victorian manner, is primarily a consequence of waking up. As you attempt to restore circulation to your fingers and toes, your thoughts wander to your daily obligations, a schedule filled with light engagements, never-ending letters, and worrying about whether your cousin's newest headwear endangers civilization. But for now, you have achieved the first small victory. You are upright, you are fully conscious. You are 80% blanket and 20% feelings of existential dread. And if you manage to avoid tripping over the receptacle, you are already well ahead in the game. Welcome to the bedroom battle. The same struggle, just a different century. Before you can face polite society, you must first survive the daily trial of getting into your clothes. This is not the simple act of grabbing the nearest sweater. No, you require assistance, usually from a highly patient lady's maid, just to be constrained into stays so tight they could potentially alter your genetic code. Breathing is not mandatory. Proper posture is essential. You begin the trial shaking in your undergarments, the final lingering trace of comfort before the full body armour of the day is applied. Your maid approaches with the quiet resolution of a Victorian combat medic, already inspecting your ribcage and calculating the likelihood of you losing consciousness before the first meal. The corset itself is a formidable device, reinforced with boning, secured with laces, and engineered to mould your midsection into an hourglass shape. Even if you were naturally shaped more like a reliable loaf of bread, the process is less about sliding it on and more of a fight against the laws of nature. You grab the bedpost for stability, while your maid tugs at the laces with the kind of focus usually reserved for pulling tree roots from the soil. Each pull is accompanied by the delicate sound of straining material, desperate exhalations, and on a fortunate morning, only a touch of wheezing. This is the Victorian version of high-intensity interval training. Hold still, breathe in, endure. If you are fortunate, the stays fit as intended, which means you can almost take a complete breath and only experience numbness in one limb. If you are less fortunate, you are trying out for the main role in a very slow, very courteous suffocation. Victorian society believed a narrow waist symbolised peak beauty and self-discipline. But the reality is that it is a daily contest between personal vanity, the laws of physics, and your body's fundamental need to keep functioning. But wait, there is more. The corset is only the beginning. Over it goes a delicate cotton underskirt, then a second underskirt, then perhaps one made of wool if the British weather is promising cold punishment. Each underskirt is another shield against both the chill and any notions of moving spontaneously. By the time you are fully outfitted, your lower body resembles a tiered celebration dessert, and any swift attempt to sit down is a carefully weighted risk. Next arrives the cage crinoline, a bell-shaped framework of whalebone or steel designed to give your skirt its fashionable volume and guarantee you occupy more area in the reception room than a typical Victorian footstool. Navigating through doorways transforms into a strategic operation. If you misjudge the angle, you will either wedge yourself into the space or take the nearby coat rack down with you. If you have ever attempted to parallel park a large automobile on a congested street, you have an idea of what it is like to cross a breakfast room while wearing a crinoline. Now, the outer garment. This might be cotton for the daytime, silk if you possess significant wealth, or heavy wool if you anticipate spending several hours regretting your existence. The sleeves are tight, the buttons are countless, and every layer is designed to convey a clear message. You are not here for personal comfort. Your maid fastens the dozens of minute buttons extending from your throat to your ankles, each one a tribute to patience and the world's most impractical approach to fashion engineering. Accessories are next, stockings held up by garters that, let's be honest, never stay in place. A pair of boots laced up to your mid-calf. A covering to fill in any inappropriate gaps near your neck. And naturally, gloves. You may be one minor discomfort away from fainting, but at least your wrists are covered with modesty. Finally, your hair must be arranged, a procedure so involved it deserves its own dramatic stage show. Curls are fastened, bonnets are positioned, and not a single strand is permitted to escape, lest the neighbours start complaining. A light spray of lavender scent finishes the ensemble, although after half an hour wrestling with the corset, what you truly require is hydration and a support group. Fully dressed, you are prepared to face the world. Or at least, the corridor. Standing straighter, breathing less deeply, and with a renewed appreciation for contemporary casual clothes. It is not merely getting dressed, it is an act of Victorian fashion survival. Forget scarfing down a breakfast burrito in your vehicle. In Victorian England, breakfast is a refined, silent ritual of hot tea, toasted bread, and the heavy weight of familial expectations. The good news? Porridge is always available. The bad news? So is your mother's polite disapproval. You enter the breakfast chamber after your exhaustive battle with corsets, layered petticoats, and self-esteem. The dining table stretches so far you are not entirely sure where it actually ends. Possibly in a different postal code. Crisp white table linen, silver utensils, and enough porcelain to make a royal occasion feel modest await you, along with at least one relative whose expression is already fixed on mild displeasure. Taking your designated chair, never, ever the head of the table, unless you are the family matriarch, and even then, only if everyone else has passed away. You prepare yourself for the first challenge, the act of serving the tea. This is more than just a drink. It is a meticulous test. Pour too quickly, and you risk splashing the fabric cover. Scandalous. Pour too slowly, and Aunt Agnes will emit a sigh so profound she might dislodge a rib. A delicate spoon taps against the fine cup as you stir in precisely 1 cube of sugar. Unless, of course, someone is watching, in which case it is half a cube and a display of extreme dietary restraint. Milk is added afterward unless you are a known nonconformist, in which case you might add it first, just to observe who inhales sharply. The offerings are consistent, if not particularly thrilling. Toast, arranged like small roof tiles, rests in a silver rack designed to guarantee maximum lack of moisture by the time it gets to your plate. Porridge, thick enough to spackle gaps in a plaster wall, is ladled into china bowls with the dreary solemnity of a minor funeral. If the date is special, you might receive a single soft-boiled egg, or in a moment of true daring extravagance, a lone link of sausage. Each mouthful must be consumed with the appropriate cutlery at a measured, proper pace, and preferably with no visible sign of enjoyment. Conversation is tolerated, but only in a hushed, restrained murmur, and only on topics that won't give the butler a start or furnish grandmother with fresh ammunition to discuss the Crimean War again. Safe subjects are limited to the weather, the status of the garden, and whether anyone has yet spotted Lady Penelope's new terrier. Never speak of bodily functions, the stock market, or, heaven forbid, feelings. And then there is the silent, heavy presence of familial discord. Your father, a fortress built of linen and the daily paper, occasionally lowers the sheets to issue a cryptic decree about the virtue of promptness. Translation: you were precisely 2 minutes late. Your younger siblings silently devise the total destruction of the oatmeal, while your mother surveys the dining table with an expression that conveys both quiet pride and a deep secret fear that you will never marry. Meanwhile, your own anxiety bubbles along with the steaming tea. Did you remember to keep your elbows entirely off the mahogany? Is your napkin correctly placed in your lap, folded into an origami sculpture of quiet deference? Is your posture straight, yet not so straight that it hints at rigidity, which implies nerves, which implies a secret, which suggests you'll become the subject of post-breakfast whispers? There's a tangible reason Victorians designed fainting couches. Most ladies were simply desperate for a flat surface where they could panic in total privacy. Servants glide in and out, clearing dirty plates and restocking the constantly diminishing supply of toast. You must avoid making any eye contact. If your fork drops, you must not, under any circumstances, pick it up yourself. That specific task belongs to a footman whose one and only pleasure in life may be judging the precise loudness of your mistake. The morning meal concludes not with a hasty stampede for the door, but with a gentle rustle of folded napkins, a quiet scrape of chairs being tucked back in, and one last round of passive-aggressive comments concerning someone's hairstyle. Looking weary, you rise from your chair, not nourished but emotionally depleted, ready for the day's next ordeal, and so ends Victorian breakfast. It is less a simple meal and more an endurance trial in matters of taste, tact, and the subtle art of enduring your relatives before 9 in the morning. Congratulations, you survived. At least until the sun rises tomorrow. You might assume a Victorian beauty regimen involves fragrant soaps and relaxing, perfumed baths, but you would be incorrect. Hair is brushed for a full 30 minutes with the relentless precision of a military exercise, and a proper bath is more of a mythical tale than a reality. Dry shampoo, the reality is flower powder, deodorant. Try to resign. Let us begin with your greatest crowning glory, your hair. It is simultaneously your greatest source of pride and your heaviest burden. Victorian hair is not merely hair. It is a constant, full-time occupation, a social barometer, and a potential catalyst for scandalous gossip. Each morning your maid appears armed with a stiff boar bristle brush, an array of tortoise-shell combs, and the single-minded purpose of a general preparing for a war. The dedicated brushing process lasts for such a long time, you could comfortably read Jane Eyre out loud and still have time left over for the pre-breakfast newspaper headlines. Why such excessive brushing? Because the act of washing your hair, much like spotting a unicorn, is both exceedingly rare and logistically difficult. A true Victorian hair washing is an epic and exhausting event. Water must be carried from the kitchen, heated on the range, and hauled up several flights of stairs by a red-faced servant who is likely questioning their entire career path. Then there is the soap, possibly homemade, possibly caustic enough to remove paint, and always oddly chunky. Most women only risk a complete wash once a week at the absolute most. For everyone else, refreshing one's locks means a delicate dusting of hair powder, rice flour if you are wealthy, common flour if you are not, or in moments of quiet despair, a little talk and a prayer. The end result? Hair that feels slightly less greasy but now smells faintly like yesterday's breakfast rolls. As for the remainder of your body, the Victorian bath is more like folklore than a daily routine. Full immersion bathing is strictly reserved for special occasions or an impending royal visit. Most days you must make do with the basin wash, which necessitates a pitcher of lukewarm water, a small sponge, and a highly strategic game of determining which body parts are most likely to be examined by a doctor, a clergyman, or your mother-in-law. Bathhouses exist but are regarded with profound suspicion and sometimes outright terror. Who knows what terrible things might occur in such places? Cleanliness, socializing, enjoyment. Soap itself is a complicated and tricky matter. Expensive perfumed soap is the exclusive domain of the very wealthy, and even they use it sparingly, as if every bubbly lather chips a year off the family fortune. For everyone else, soap is a plain brown brick of animal fat and lye that functions as an emergency stain remover and triples as a convenient doorstop. If you are extremely fortunate, you might have a lavender sachet tucked among your linens to impart a faint suggestion of cleanliness. But mostly you smell like a subtle blend of laundry starch, wood smoke, and whatever anxiety you accumulated at breakfast. Deodorant. That is more of a theoretical concept than an actual product. The best you can hope for is to subtly mask any offensive body odours with a light dusting of cologne, or by simply never lifting your arms above waist level. Victorian etiquette conveniently mandates dainty hand movements and carefully folded fans, most likely because no one wants to unleash what might be lurking under all those layers of heavy fabric. If all else fails, there remains the tried and true ultimate solution. Blame the dog, blame the poor weather, blame the French. Teeth present an entirely different battleground. Toothpaste exists, but it is sold as a powder, often flavoured with harsh charcoal, abrasive salt, or chalk, and leaves your mouth feeling exactly like you licked a dusty chalkboard. Toothbrushes are made with bristles strong enough to scrub barnacles off a ship's hull, and dental appointments are an adventure reserved only for the truly desperate and courageous. Dental floss. You are far more likely to be flossing with a stray thread you found attached to your stays, yet despite all of this, the final result is a kind of weary, muted elegance. You look perfectly presentable, at least when viewed from a respectable social distance. Your hair is shiny, perhaps from a full month's worth of built-up oil. Your face is liberally powdered for both enhancement and the effective concealment of facts. And your perfume is just strong enough to keep most people from asking awkward questions. In Victorian England, the appearance of cleanliness is infinitely more important than the reality of being clean. And if you ever have any doubt, just remember that somewhere, someone is faithfully brushing their hair for the full 30 minutes and pretending not to notice that you haven't had a proper bath since the last harvest season. You, however, are now ready to courageously face the day. Oily roots, powdery scalp, and all. The true highlight of your morning is the unavoidable round of calling cards, those small engraved tickets that serve to prove to your peers that you are, in fact, still alive and only mildly socially inept. You will perform and receive enough visits to fill a complex spreadsheet, all in the desperate pursuit of avoiding being critically discussed in the wrong drawing room. Let's be perfectly clear. Social calls are not a choice. They are not done for personal enjoyment. They are, in reality, the very foundation of the Victorian social structure, a never-ending circular cycle of visits, reciprocal return visits, thank you visits, sympathy visits, and on truly celebratory occasions, the I just moved in, please don't despise me visit. At the very centre of it all is the calling card, that precise rectangle of thick, heavy paper printed with your name in a typeface so ornate it looks like it might be attempting to spell something using telegraph code. The ritual commences immediately after breakfast, when the family butler presents you with a silver tray bristling with cards. Each one is a social obligation, a tiny reminder that Lady Farnsworth stopped by, and if you fail to return the courtesy within 3 days, you will be irrevocably labelled a hermit, a snob, or, worst of all, simply odd. Your own supply of cards, freshly delivered from the printer, sits waiting, blank on the reverse, ready for a desperate last-minute note. So sorry I missed you, or the occasional passive-aggressive flourish. Apologies for last Tuesday, indisposed due to a sudden confluence of weather and destiny. Now begins the strategic portion of the day. Calling is not a casual stroll and simple knock on the door. It is a precisely timed, logistically challenging social campaign. You must consult your visiting book, a small leather-bound journal, a document far more detailed than your financial records. In this sacred, detailed tome, you meticulously track who called when and what exact degree of attention each call warrants. Failure to reciprocate within the appropriate, short time frame means instant social death. So it feels less like keeping up with close friends and more like desperately trying not to become a cautionary tale at someone else's tea party. You set out wearing your finest visiting dress, a garment specifically designed to signal that you are only planning to stay for 15 minutes, but are still unquestionably better dressed than anyone currently in the host household. Gloves are mandatory, a hat is obligatory, and a parasol serves as both a defensive weapon and a privacy shield. You climb into the family carriage or, if you are particularly unlucky, set off on foot, mentally bracing yourself for a morning of insipid small talk and sitting ramrod straight on sofas that seem to have been engineered by orthopedic pessimists. Upon arrival at the first house, you are shown into the drawing room by a servant who will, with a completely straight face, inform the lady of the house that Miss So-and-so is calling. If you are fortunate, she is actually available. If she is not, you simply leave a card and swiftly move on, secretly relieved, but forced to pretend you are utterly devastated at missing her. If she does appear, you are in for the true test. 15 agonizing minutes of conversation as light as air and as precise and sharp as a sword fight. The weather, one's health, and mutual acquaintances are all perfectly safe subjects. Politics, finances, and your genuine opinions are strictly forbidden. You sip your tea, nibble a biscuit so dry it could easily be used as packing material, and try desperately not to drop a single crumb down the front of your dress. If you can successfully manage this while sitting with flawless posture and making just enough eye contact to appear genuinely interested, you are, by Victorian standards, flourishing. And do not get too comfortable. There is a precise and delicate choreography to these social calls. Stay longer than 15 minutes and you will be immediately seen as overly needy. Leave too quickly and you are instantly deemed cold. Ask to use the powder room, and you might as well declare all-out war on etiquette itself. On particularly busy days, you will squeeze in 6 or 7 such calls, each one another opportunity to accidentally offend someone's third cousin twice removed. When you finally return home, it is time for the receiving portion of the day. Now you must be ready to greet incoming callers with a wide smile, offer a small, dry cake, and pretend you were not just moments ago hiding in the library, dreading any human interaction. For every single card you collect, another slot on your social to-do list is filled. The process never actually ends. It only resets. Somewhere, someone is always about to take offence, and every drawing room is a silent, critical arena of reputation. In the end, the ultimate winner of the Victorian social call is the person with the biggest stack of collected cards, the emptiest schedule, and the most finely honed ability to make it all appear completely effortless, while secretly longing for a day with absolutely no visitors at all. Now it is time to sit quietly by the window and embroider something you genuinely do not care about while making just enough conversation to avoid all accusations of sulking. Needlework is not merely a hobby. It is a silent competition for the title of most patient martyr in your social circle. If you are picturing a peaceful morning, with soft sunlight gently filtering through lace curtains as you lovingly stitch delicate roses onto a handkerchief, let me immediately correct your vision. Needlework in the Victorian home is less a creative pursuit and more a marathon of sheer endurance, strict etiquette, and emotional suppression. It is the Victorian equivalent of both a fidget toy and passive aggression. Everyone is performing it, everyone is pretending to wholeheartedly enjoy it, and everyone is quietly praying not to stab themselves with the sharp end of a tapestry needle. Your tools are meticulously arranged on a small side table. An embroidery hoop, a selection of thimbles, sharp scissors so keen they could slice through familial tension, and a rainbow of colourful silk threads. There is an unfinished sampler nearby showcasing cheerful little sayings like "home sweet home" and "a stitch in time saves 9" alongside what you secretly suspect is a coded cry for help. If you are truly skilled, you might attempt a chair cover, a lacy doily intended to protect the expensive furniture from gentlemen's hair oil, and presumably any remaining will to live. The pressure is intense. Your mother and 3 aunts are present, all working with the frantic intensity of Olympic athletes and the facial expressions of saints auditioning for martyrdom. The conversation is light, entirely calculated, and slightly malicious. "How many stitches per minute are you managing, dear?" That particular boarder is incredibly ambitious. Your French knots are so rustic. The competition is never explicit, but everyone knows who is currently winning. It is whoever looks the most serenely calm while sewing an entire alphabet onto a napkin, with eyesight so strained they are seeing double. But this is far more than simple busy work. Needlework is the only acceptable way for women to fill hours that would otherwise be spent questioning the ultimate futility of existence, or, worse, having opinions. While your fingers are occupied, you can easily eavesdrop on conversations, tune out tedious relatives, or perfect your serene and industrious expression for the moment the minister drops by unannounced. If your embroidery is truly intricate, you have a perfect excuse to avoid the more dangerous conversational topics, such as marriage prospects or why you still haven't mastered the piano. Occasionally someone will read aloud, uplifting literature only of course, while the rest of you nod politely and attempt to avoid sewing a flower stem straight through your skirt. Novels are deeply frowned upon, too provocative. Poetry is risky, too many feelings. So you inevitably end up listening to a dull selection from Moral Lessons for Young Ladies while you attempt to execute a chain stitch that does not look like a worm having a nervous panic attack. The great unspoken rule is never to allow your hands to be idle. Idleness, after all, is the first dangerous step toward moral decay, or even worse, being accused of laziness by your own grandmother. So you continue to sew handkerchiefs, table runners, mysterious little sachets no one ever actually uses, and enough pillowcases to suffocate a small town. The ultimate driving goal? To create a hope chest, a massive trunk full of embroidered linens ready for the marriage you may or may not desire, but are certainly expected to prepare for with the unwavering enthusiasm of someone packing for a trip to the icy Antarctic. But needlework presents its own unique dangers. Dropping your needle means crawling on your knees, desperately hunting for the tiny saboteur before the housemaid's foot can find it first. Pricked fingers are a daily and common reality, often hidden with stoic dignity. Or, if you are feeling particularly dramatic, displayed with a deep sigh for maximum sympathy. There is also the constant looming threat of eye strain. Victorian women routinely went half-blind by the age of 40, but at least the chair covers lived on, and through it all you must maintain a steady, slightly glazed smile. Because in the world of extreme embroidery, it is not about finding enjoyment. It is about surviving the endless afternoon, one tiny, perfect stitch at a time, and proving to everyone present that when it comes to patience, nobody suffers quite as beautifully as you do. If you are fortunate enough to steal an hour completely alone, you might cautiously read a novel, ideally something deemed appropriately uplifting. Unless you are feeling truly scandalous and manage to sneak a quick peek at the latest sensation novel, being sure to hide it under a heavy copy of Pilgrim's Progress for complete plausible deniability. Reading in Victorian England is a surprisingly subversive act, especially when performed by women. It feels less like simple recreation and more like a secret mission carried out with the hush and anxiety of an operative in the field. You steal a quick glance toward the doorway, listening closely for the recognizable scrape of your mother's entrance or the deep, warning cough of a footman. Outwardly, you sit modestly in your seat, a book such as Moral Philosophy or The Young Lady's Guide to Proper Behaviour open on your skirt. Yet hidden beneath that moralistic jacket is something much more thrilling. Possibly Wilkie Collins, or the newest chapters of Lady Audley's Secret released in a series. You take risks, naturally. The specific books you select are a statement about your social views. Wholesome books, life stories, sermons and essays on flowers are expected and unexciting, like plain vegetables. These are the volumes you position prominently on your bedside table for visitors or when Great Aunt Millicent arrives and wants to test your knowledge of religious principles. But privately, you desire a little more stimulation, a verse with real emotion, a novel featuring a heroine who acts more and swoons less. Or, on days when you feel particularly defiant, a banned French novel poorly translated by someone who clearly misunderstood the actual meaning. Reading naturally follows rules. You must sit perfectly straight, ankles crossed, appearing composed, the established sign for "do not bother me." But also, do not seem to enjoy this too much. If you let out a tiny laugh, a quick gasp, or show a scandalous blush, you risk attracting your supervisor, who will descend like a bird of prey to check your book for unsuitable influences, emotional outbursts, or, worst of all, an active imagination. At times you are expected to read passages aloud to the family, a situation best compared to a stressful captive negotiation. You carefully select sections that lack passion, criminal activity, or anything even slightly suggestive. You are reading for the moral instruction of the group, not for the private thrill of a late-night meeting on a wild, remote field. Any mistake, such as a nervous giggle at a double meaning, can and will be used against you during the family's official review. And yet, despite the scrutiny, reading serves as an escape. Within the pages of a beloved novel you can tour Italy, climb the Alps, or solve crimes in misty London, all without having to leave the parlour. You can experience love a dozen times before lunch, perform acts of serious courage, or, if truly bored, fantasize about a world where you wear pants and prepare your own breakfast. Books also operate as forbidden items among your friends. You exchange the most scandalous titles beneath your sewing project, pass notes about the finest parts, and have quiet arguments about whether Mr. Darcy is actually suitable for marriage or just an overly reserved person with personal space issues. Some books are so notorious they are only referred to by secret code names. The Blue Book is concealed behind the world map, while that awful French volume is hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Prayers for Young Ladies. You become a member of a hidden library network, operating with the complete secrecy of a Victorian espionage ring, and for all the rules, the genuine success is managing a full, uninterrupted hour with your preferred book. You settle into a bright window seat, lose yourself in someone else's drama, and for a short time, forget that your own biggest difficulty is not being caught staring at a man with side whiskers. When the hour concludes, you mark your page, conceal the evidence, and return to the world of appropriate pursuits, your spirit a little lighter and your desire for trouble slightly increased. In the Victorian era, reading is not merely a hobby, it is a small act of rebellion, a private romance, and, if you are fortunate, a peek at the world beyond the next social call. Yes, there are domestic staff, but they don't simply manage themselves. Imagine being in charge of a group of employees who are all secretly convinced you have no idea what you are doing. You inspect the utensils, sample the soup, and try hard not to cry when you find dirt on the staircase railing. Running a Victorian home is not delicate housekeeping. It is high-level management with extra layers of constraint. Your morning as the household's chief executive does not start with a meeting in an office, but with a daily report given by a tired housekeeper who lists updates as if describing troop movements in a major conflict. The laundry has frozen solid outside, the cook is angry again, and someone found the young male servant sleeping in the coal storage area. If you thought you would just glide through the day wearing lace and jewels, you have drastically underestimated the demands of this position. The staff list looks like something from a literary classic. Chambermaids, serving maids, kitchen maids, cooks, butlers, footmen, and that mysterious general assistant. You are expected to know every name, remember their special dates, and instantly recall who is currently angry with whom. Make a mistake, and you will face the kind of domestic revolt that can only be settled with favours, usually involving sweet treats and an urgent reading of Mrs. Beeton's Guide to Management. Your first obligation is the morning inspection. This turns into a formal walkthrough with no fewer than 2 maids following you, creating an atmosphere of apprehension. You confirm that beds are made with military precision, that the sitting room cushions are perfectly plumped, and that no one, absolutely no one, has tracked muddy footprints across the main stairway. Every error is noted with a sigh and a gentle correction, because raising your voice means the entire household will spend the next week talking about your character. Down in the kitchen area, you taste the stock, not for enjoyment, but as a defence against a culinary protest. If it is over-seasoned, the cook looks at you as if you have personally insulted her heritage. If it lacks flavour, you are offered more salt with a smile sharp enough to cut a loaf. Menu planning becomes a negotiation. What can you present that is impressive, affordable, and unlikely to start a major social conflict? The food storage room feels like a cooking competition where the hidden ingredients are last night's root vegetables and extreme pressure. Handling the money is a dangerous job. The household accounts are a difficult puzzle of bills, IOUs, and ledgers written in a handwriting that could be mistaken for ancient symbols. You try to keep track of spending on lamp oil, meat, and enough stiffener to make your table linens stand on their own. Heaven forbid you go over budget. Nothing results in an emergency meeting with your husband faster than an unexpected extra expense on heating coal. Then comes the drama. The maid crying because the butler moved her cleaning supplies. The footman with a mysterious injury that happened near the silver cabinet. Again. And the ongoing puzzle of who keeps leaving partially eaten cookies behind the clock. Every argument tests your ability to mediate. Your leadership style becomes a combination of caregiver, authority, counsellor, and gentle tyrant. Despite appearances, there is no time off. You are available for every emergency, every stuck lock, every unidentifiable mark on the parlour rug. When company arrives, you change into a director, leading a perfect show of greetings, refreshments, and perfectly timed observations about the weather. If the meal goes well and nobody sets the curtains on fire, you count it as a win. All of this, remember, is done while wearing multiple layers of undergarments and a corset, maintaining a happy expression, and never once admitting you would rather be hiding under the stairs with the house cat. So the next time someone says, "But you have help," remember that you are not relaxing. You are operating an empire where small particles of dirt are rebels and a serving spoon is your royal scepter. Congratulations, you are a chief executive and your performance review is delivered whenever your mother-in-law makes a surprise visit. Your main daily practice involves verbal sparring, avoiding personal questions, offering exactly the right amount of witty commentary, and never ever admitting you genuinely do not care about the weather. Every conversation is an intense lesson in not offending anyone who could destroy your social standing with a single raised eyebrow. Let's be honest, the true battlefield of Victorian society is not fought with swords or even with dinner knives, but with carefully chosen words. The ability to suggest everything and nothing at the same time is the most valuable skill any woman can master. The competition is refined. If chess involved more lace and fewer actual moves, it would perfectly resemble Victorian conversation. You are not simply talking, you are creating a defence of proper conduct, a curtain of politeness, and when things get serious, a distraction of talk about flowers. You start your day with practice rounds, exchanging pleasantries with your household at the morning meal, each comment sharpened with a subtle, hidden meaning. "You seem quite rested, dear. I observe you managed the corset again. Did you sleep soundly?" Translation: I heard every tiny noise and know you hid that book under your pillow. Every question becomes a puzzle. every reply a minor international incident waiting to happen. As you move into the social hours, the risks increase. The drawing room is your battle space. Here you meet a series of friends, relatives, and that one neighbour who is frankly more interested in your laundry line than your opinions. Topics are carefully controlled. The weather is always a safe subject, unless of course it is raining hard and someone's new hat has been ruined, in which case the atmosphere can quickly turn hostile. Gardening remains a reliable choice, but proceed with caution. Complimenting the wrong type of rose can lead to an entire afternoon of quietly aggressive talk about plants. Intelligence is necessary, but only in small amounts. Too sharp, and you risk being called unsuitable. Too uninteresting, and you are dull. The key is to drop just enough smart remarks to show you have a mind, but not enough to suggest you might actually use it for anything dangerous, like having original thoughts. Practice phrases like, "how engaging," and "isn't that extraordinary," which work for almost any situation, from hearing about a neighbour's new carriage to enduring a long lecture about root vegetables. Then come the conversational traps. Someone asks, "When will you be travelling to Bath this season?" What they actually mean is, "Why are you still in town?" a well-meaning aunt asks about your needlework. Is it finished? But the correct answer is always almost aunt. Thank you for your interest. Never, I would prefer to eat the thread. The technique involves answering without giving information, replying without revealing anything, and above all, avoiding giving anyone something genuinely interesting to repeat. But conversation is not just for defence, it is also for offence. Deliver a carefully planned compliment, and you can improve your own standing. Your daughter's piano practice is showing great progress works even if last night's performance sounded like two angry cats fighting in a musical instrument. Offer a subtle change of subject when conversation moves into risky territory. "Oh, what a lovely vase! Did that come from your trip to the coast?" If everything else fails, pretend to cough, drop a teacup, or show sudden, intense interest in the wall design. The biggest danger, of course, is an unintended embarrassment. One poorly timed joke, one honest opinion, and your reputation could be ruined by the next day's letter delivery. A relative's careless mention of a book could become a family emergency. Disagreeing with a priest, laughing too loudly, or being seen alone with the wrong male relative can all result in you becoming the main course at the next gossip session. The solution? Smile, agree, and remember that silence is often the most effective comeback. By the end of the day, after spending hours navigating conversational landmines, you are tired, mentally sharper than a lawyer, but emotionally drained. You have protected your secrets, given out compliments, avoided all talk of politics, and managed not to admit that you honestly do not care if it rains or not. Congratulations, you have mastered the skill of Victorian conversation, saying everything required and nothing at all in 4 words or less. Physical exercise is not about developing muscle, it is about moving gracefully in circles while trying not to seem bored. Walking outside is permitted if you are supervised, bundled correctly, and resistant to insults from children on the street. Victorian fitness focuses less on using up energy and more on passing the time in the most elegant way possible. The phrase, "taking a turn about the room," does not mean anything as extreme as aerobic exercise or even a fast walk. It means exactly what it sounds like. You stand up from your sewing, gather your heavy skirts, and start moving around the edge of the largest available space. The drawing room, the music room, or for the very determined, the long hallway, at a careful pace. This is not for heart health. It is about appearing slightly out of breath, but never actually sweating. Naturally, you are not alone in your indoor circuits. Your mother, sisters, and at least one cousin have joined the line, making the entire event look like the world's slowest parade. Conversation must remain light, volume must be kept low, and posture must be flawless. Slouching is for the weak, or worse, for the French. You check your appearance in the mirror every half lap to make sure your hair is still secure and your expression is set to pleasantly attentive, even as your mind begs for an exercise machine and noise-cancelling headphones. If you grow tired of this endless oval, you might be allowed an outdoor walk if the weather and proper etiquette permit. This requires a process only slightly less complicated than preparing for an Arctic trip. First, you must find a chaperone, a requirement that ensures you are protected from both the weather and any lurking dangerous bachelors. Then comes the wrapping, shawl, gloves, bonnet, heavy coat, and the absolutely necessary umbrella. The goal is to step outside looking like a moving monument of wool and ribbon, with only a small area of your face visible between your hat brim and scarf. Once outside, the air is refreshing and healthy, and so are the critical looks from every passing neighbour. A successful walk means returning home neither red-faced nor dishevelled, with not a single hair out of place and your shoes only slightly dusted with dirt. Should you go farther, perhaps to the park or along the main walkway, you will be joined by other women on similar outings, everyone quietly pretending this counts as physical activity while exchanging looks that say, "If I trip on this paving stone and fall into a puddle, please just leave me here." And do not forget the constantly watching eyes of small children and poor street urchins who offer running commentary. "Look at her fancy hat, miss. Be careful. Don't fall asleep while standing." You keep your head high and glide past, pretending not to hear them. In a way, this serves as a workout for your social graces as much as for your physical self. If you happen to feel a bit more spirited, a few activities are permitted. You can play croquet on the lawn, provided you don't swing your mallet with too much force. If you are genuinely defiant, a brisk horseback ride might appeal, but even this should be kept to a respectable walk and performed under constant supervision. Any activity that is too strenuous risks inducing perspiration, and perspiring is strictly forbidden unless you are in a dark private room with a doctor's consent. Ultimately, Victorian exercise is about the appearance of effort. You return home with cheeks only slightly flushed, posture notably straighter, and announce that you feel completely revived. This is simply code for, "Thank goodness that ordeal is complete." There is no gym membership required. All you need is a few 100 feet of well-kept floor, and the iron will not to surrender to boredom. You sit back down, your pulse exactly the same as before, and quietly ponder whether walking in circles is perhaps a metaphor for the entire Victorian life. Lots of motion, but no genuine advancement. And just like that, you have fulfilled your daily exercise requirement without shedding a single drop of sweat or violating any rule. The afternoon is dedicated to music practice, piano, harp, or singing, ideally all three, and preferably performed poorly. Every incorrect note is a subtle reminder that your true value is found in your social elegance, not in your musical ability. Victorian music rehearsal is less about becoming an accomplished virtuoso and more about serving as pleasant background noise. The family expects the quiet tinkling of a piano to waft from the drawing room. It is as much a marker of middle-class status as lace curtains or an endless supply of potted greenery. You, however, approach the keyboard with the eagerness of someone facing their own execution, though this execution involves sheet music and an audience of critical relatives. The piano itself is a Victorian marvel, tall, gleaming, and perpetually out of tune due to the volatile British weather. You sit up straight and rigid, ankles crossed, hands perfectly placed, that is, until you play your first wrong note, at which point your youngest sibling releases a dramatic sigh of frustrated artistic judgment. You labour through the scales, your fingers stumbling over passages that resemble a terrified small animal trying to claw its way out of the keys. Your music teacher, if present, hovers and taps the sheet music with a pencil, managing to convey both unending patience and profound inner misery. The same applies to the harp or singing. The harp is an instrument invented by a person who clearly harboured a deep dislike for other people's backs. You attempt a simple melody and rapidly realise the sound you are making is less angelic serenade and more an angry cat wrestling with a length of rope. As for singing, you project your voice with all the courage of someone who knows Aunt Gertrude is listening from the next room, her ears sharpened by decades of mediocre community theatre and thwarted dreams. Mistakes are inevitable. Wrong note, blame the weather, miss the rhythm. The sheet music must have slid out of place. A clashing chord? Clearly the piano is defective. In Victorian life, the aim is not to achieve musical mastery. The objective is to demonstrate the correct balance of effort, humility, and a willingness to be gently embarrassed. If you are a genius, that's splendid. If you are not, simply smile and hope no one remembers your attempt at green sleeves. Music, above all, is about establishing the appropriate reputation. You perform for guests, for family, for anyone who will listen, or at least pretend to. Your reward for surviving another rendition of the Blue Danube is a flurry of polite applause and a gentle suggestion to practice just a little more, darling. You may secretly yearn to set fire to the sheet music and move to Paris to become a cabaret star, but you know better. In Victorian society, quiet suffering is always preferable to outright rebellion. And just in case you thought you could avoid it, every respectable young woman is expected to play at least one instrument. Extra points are awarded for 2, or for pretending to enjoy a small amount of light composition, usually in the form of a waltz that sounds suspiciously similar to the last 3 waltzes you wrote. You might share music with acquaintances, all while maintaining the subtle facade that your hand occasionally slips onto a slightly bolder piece, like a forbidden polka. If you are particularly unlucky, a family recital is scheduled. The drawing room is meticulously rearranged, the best chairs are dusted, and the entire household is summoned to observe your struggle with Beethoven. The applause is always civil, the criticism always veiled. You played with such strong feeling, dear. Perhaps a little less next time. When the trial is finally concluded, you close the piano lid with a sigh of relief, your fingers tingling and your ego only marginally bruised. You survived. You may never receive an invitation to the Royal Albert Hall, but at least you managed not to snap a string or inadvertently spark a polka rebellion. Congratulations! You have completed your obligation as the designated living background music for the Victorian home. And if you ever question your value, just remember this. No one ever criticised a young woman for playing too softly. But playing too proficiently, that is practically a scandal. Maintaining social ties with your friends and family requires composing endless letters, each one longer than a modern-day novel and just about as exciting as reading the user manual for a foot spa. Sales of stationery must have been astronomical. If you considered modern-day texting to be tiring, then welcome to the Victorian universe, where catching up demands several hours of elegant penmanship, half a bottle of ink, and the definite threat of hand cramps so severe you begin to envy the household pet. Every acquaintance, every cousin, and every distant godmother anticipates a handwritten update, delivered with maximum flourish and absolutely zero spelling errors. In an age before spell check, every letter you dispatch is a potential public relations disaster, a minor literary masterpiece that will be scrutinised and saved. And if you are truly unfortunate, it might be read aloud at future family gatherings. You start by selecting the correct paper. This is not simply a piece of generic paper. We are talking about cream-coloured monogram sheets kept in a box so sophisticated it practically looks down on your messy handwriting. The ink must be black, or perhaps a deep blue-black if you are feeling slightly rebellious. The quill pen, because yes, it is still the proper tool, must be sharpened to a point so exact it could function as a surgical instrument. God help you if you create a smudge. Even a tiny blot of ink will be a source of worry for weeks. The first hurdle? The greeting. My dearest cousin Arabella, I hope this letter finds you enjoying the best of health and spirits. Victorian manners demand the opening paragraph be both elaborate and utterly devoid of actual meaning. 10 lines in, you have thoroughly covered the current weather, the status of your mother's nerves, and the remarkable hardiness of your houseplants. You have not yet even approached the actual reason for your correspondence. Next, the main substance. This is where the real struggle commences. You must detail every significant event. Visitors, sicknesses, dances attended, marriage proposals made, marriage proposals refused, servants hired, servants dismissed, and if you are truly desperate, the minor excitement of acquiring a new tablecloth. Each detail is extended like an episode of a drawn-out dramatic serial, only with more passive-aggressive observations. Mrs. Worthington's tea was a splendid event, although some might argue her lemon cakes were more aspirational than palatable. Translation: I barely survived it. Please send immediate help. But the genuine purpose of letter writing is to regulate information. You want to keep your friends close, your family nearer, and your rivals completely confused. Subtle brags are carefully woven into seemingly humble statements. I've been quite engaged with my embroidery, as my sampler for Lady Highmore's charitable event will be put on display at the county fair. You intentionally forget to mention that you pricked yourself with the embroidery needle no less than 6 times. Halfway through the 3rd page, your writing hand is cramping, your ink supply is dwindling, and you have developed a newfound appreciation for the simple abbreviation. Unfortunately, there is no equivalent to LOL in Victorian communication. Every sentence must be a complete thought, and every feeling must be meticulously detailed. If you wish to include a joke, it must be disguised as an anecdote concerning your neighbour's goose. I beg your pardon for my meagre attempt at wit, but I could not help but laugh when... Then comes the closing. Victorian etiquette manuals recommend at least 4 complimentary phrases. With the sincerest affection, your ever-devoted friend, I remain as always, your humble servant. And for good measure, may Providence look kindly upon you and your family. By the end, your signature is nearly illegible, and your hand is shaking like a carriage travelling on a rough country road. The letter is finally finished, but your task is not yet complete. You must fold it precisely. Address the envelope using calligraphy that would impress a monastic scribe, seal it with a small amount of wax, monogrammed naturally, and entrust it to a footman for delivery. No immediate delivery here. Your words will be transported by coach, by train, and by the sheer force of social custom. And then the process starts over. Each letter you answer inspires 3 more in reply, each one longer and more indirect than the last. You begin to suspect that this is the secret way Victorians prepared for marathons, not through running, but through unending correspondence. Congratulations, you have finished your daily Victorian texting regimen. No emojis are required, just the faint, lingering pain of carpal tunnel syndrome and the hope that perhaps next week someone will invent the postcard. At some point, you must bravely enter the drawing room, where everyone gathers to quietly judge each other's clothing, trade gossip, and show an eerie skill for sipping tea without ever blinking. It is like a silent auction for social status, and you are the item currently under inspection. Welcome to the daily social obstacle course. The drawing room is the Victorian equivalent of the modern group chat, only everyone is far more formally dressed, and the read receipts are conveyed through the subtle arch of an eyebrow. There is a precise, careful choreography to the afternoon assembly. You enter with the composure of someone stepping onto the stage of the world's least thrilling beauty pageant. You smile, just enough to appear pleasant, but not so much that anyone might suspect you are secretly planning your escape. Seats are chosen with all the political calculation of a Senate debate, too close to the fireplace, and you risk being accused of monopolizing the heat. Too near the window, and you are either fishing for compliments about your skin tone or listening in on the groundskeeper. The safest spot is a solid armchair, ideally one with a direct sight line to the tea service, and at least 2 potential exit paths. Once you are seated, the genuine competitions begin. The first event, the wardrobe inspection. Everyone subtly assesses everyone else's attire. Hats are analysed, shawls are ranked, and buttons are discreetly counted. Your dress is last season's shade of lavender, a risky choice. Your hemline is a quarter-inch too high. Prepare for an intense wave of silent disapproval from Mrs. Henley, who still recalls your notorious ankle exposure at the recent garden party. Tea is served with military precision, the hostess pouring without spilling a single drop, her hands steady despite the underlying tension in the air. Biscuits are circulated, each one taken with a thank you whispered so softly it might as well be mind-reading. You make every effort not to scatter shortbread crumbs onto your lap. Last week's minor accident is still a major topic of discussion across 3 counties. And then the conversation. Appropriate topics are selected with the precision of a master surgeon. The weather, the rose bushes, the subtle drama surrounding Lady Bracknell's missing pet parakeet. The challenge is to say as much as possible while revealing as little as necessary. Any mention of money, sickness, or, God forbid, personal feelings is met with the kind of silence typically reserved for serious funerals. If someone accidentally lets slip a piece of truly scandalous gossip, it is immediately covered up with a vague comment about the price of coal or a detailed discussion of different types of embroidery thread. Children, if they are present, are expected to be observed and not heard. They linger near the doorway, desperate to leave, like unpaid interns at a corporate meeting who have skipped lunch. Elderly family members doze with one eye open, always ready to leap into action should anyone dare to mention politics. All the while, there is an ongoing, silent contest. Who can project the most unbothered composure? It is a battle fought with posture, with eye contact, and with the ability to consume a biscuit without leaving crumbs on the rug. One poorly timed yawn and you face a full week of concerned inquiries about your health. And of course there is the gossip minefield. Information is exchanged in hushed tones and sidelong glances. Who is engaged, who has fallen ill, who had the audacity to laugh too loudly while at church. The stories are embellished with every retelling until what started as an innocent walk in the park is transformed into a story of social ruin and possibly a challenge to a duel. When the tea becomes cold and the conversation has cycled back to the topic of the weather. For the 3rd time, it is time to make your departure. This too is a carefully choreographed dance. To leave too soon is rude. To stay too long suggests desperation. The strategy is to smoothly exit with a slight nod, a soft goodbye, and the merest hint that you have far more engaging commitments awaiting your attention. You have survived the drawing room. You are exhausted, over-caffeinated, and slightly stiff from maintaining a perfectly straight posture for 2 solid hours. But you did it. You faced the social gauntlet and emerged with your reputation mostly preserved. In the world of Victorian society, simply getting close to success means something entirely different than it does today. Do you need a new hat or a discreet bottle of hair restorative? It's time to brave the public world and spend hours pretending the cost of lace does not make you feel faint. Remain vigilant. Shopkeepers can sense uncertainty and social discomfort from several blocks away. Victorian shopping is not, despite what popular publications might suggest, an act of personal freedom and individual expression. It is a carefully orchestrated, anxiety-inducing public ritual with the intense atmosphere of a gambling establishment and price tags to match. Your morning starts with a list written in your most elegant hand. Hat, gloves, a spool of thread, perhaps some unusual sweets. If you are feeling both adventurous and well-funded, your mother reviews your list. Then, for additional security, she questions you on the difference between decorations that are appropriate and those that are considered too gaudy. Before you step outside, the ritual commences. You must dress properly for shopping, meaning your best walking dress, gloves, and an expression that suggests, "I could purchase this entire store, yet I will still negotiate the price of a single needle." Any indication of a lack of proper appearance risks being ignored by the clerks. Or, worse yet, enduring a long lecture on the importance of thrift from Mrs. Henderson, who is absolutely listening from behind her tower of embroidered napkins. Stepping out, you join the flow of shoppers on the crowded main street, everyone sharing your anxiety, each pretending not to critique the other's choice of hats. Your companion stays close like personal security, armed with both sound advice and an ear for gossip. The shop windows glitter with enticing displays, silken ribbons, feathery caps, and unknown elixirs promising everything from a perfect face to a wedding in a fortnight. Inside the premises, the true drama unfolds. The proprietor stands ready at the counter, already assessing you. Are you a serious buyer, or simply tasting the complimentary rose water? Do you have enough money for high-quality lace, or should you be gently guided toward the cheaper items? Your hands tremble slightly as you request merely some ribbon, if you wouldn't mind. You bite back a gasp at the price, approximately equal to a week of heating fuel or 3 months of lower back pain from needlework. Purchasing headwear specifically turns into a diplomatic feat. The assistant produces options rapidly, each one fancier than the last, all the while subtly suggesting that practical ladies prefer less fashionable looks. You nod sagely, as if you have always known that deep green velvet suits the ambitious, while pale blue silk is best for the reserved. You try on bonnets, check your reflection in a slightly warped mirror, and pretend to think it over, as your attendants silently praise you avoid anything that might draw unwanted attention, like a bright feather. But the issue is bigger than just clothing. Each item you buy makes a public statement. Select a lavish ribbon and risk the milliner's cold disapproval and neighbourhood whispers. Pick plain brown gloves and everyone will assume you are in mourning or worse, cutting costs. The safest action is to choose something modest, pay with exact change, and hope the shopkeeper does not try to sell you the newest popular hair tonic. No, you definitely don't want your hair smelling like a bouquet. A terrible realization hits you afterwards. Every single purchase brings waves of regret. Did you spend too much? Have you ruined the family budget? Is owning 2 sets of gloves at once truly excessive? You leave the shop with your item wrapped in paper and a sudden impulse to apologize to your father, your savings account, and perhaps your unborn great-grandchildren. Back in the open air, the sun seems brighter and other shoppers less hostile. You walk toward home, clutching your packages, your face flushed from both the effort and the monetary concern. Shopping, you realise, is the ultimate balancing act of the Victorian age. One mistake in buying makes you a cautionary tale. One flawless purchase is discussed for years. You get back to your house, place the packages on the hall table, and swear you will never shop again. At least not until the next special offer on unusual feathers. Retail therapy, Victorian style, maximum anxiety, minimal enjoyment, and at least 3 new anecdotes. In the parlour, the focus of tea is less about drinking and more about surviving an ordeal of small cakes, manners, and relatives eager to learn about your chances of marriage. No, you are not allowed another biscuit unless you also accept a full serving of personal critique. In Victorian homes, the afternoon tea is not relaxation. It is an institution, a carefully planned social obstacle course that would frighten even seasoned veterans. You step into the parlour to the sound of delicate china rattling, the sweet, challenging smell of fresh pastry, and a room full of family whose only concerns seem to be your future, your waistline, and the correct way to eat a cucumber sandwich. First, the seating arrangement. Aunt Martha always secures the chair closest to the tea service, perfectly positioned to claim the first, and most importantly, the largest slice of cake. You try to find a safe spot, not close enough to become the main target for inquiries, yet not so far away as to look secretive, even when you are. The youngest children stand near the sweet tarts, ready to pounce the moment the grown-ups look elsewhere. Everyone else sits on the edge of their seat, watchful, proper, and silently planning the perfect route to the jam and cream. Next comes the serving of tea, a ceremony so rigid it makes a formal church service look spontaneous. The hostess keeps one eye on the pot, the other on her guests, prepared to catch anyone daring to put sugar in before milk. a blunder only slightly less serious than theft. You accept your cup with a polite word, stir precisely 3 times, and sip quietly, no matter how hot it is. Pity the soul who dips a cake when Aunt Martha is watching. Dipping, in her view, is the start of all social decay. The food and drink, in the meantime, serve as both a delight and a danger. Plates appear with neat rows of tiny sandwiches, crusts removed, fillings suspiciously mild, and towers of scones dusted with enough sugar to cover the taste of quiet disappointment. The selection of cakes is impressive, but beware taking a piece larger than your allotted share. Every mouthful is watched, every tiny crumb assessed, and every second scone secretly tallied by the family's unofficial calorie counter. Yet tea is about more than just eating. It requires conversation, or, more accurately, cross-examination in front of witnesses. As your mouth fills, Aunt Martha pounces. "So, my dear, when is the wedding? I have wondered since you turned 16. Have you thought about Lord Hamilton? He maintains a suitable income for someone so unremarkable. My efforts in matchmaking are the only thing standing between you and spinsterhood. You dodge gracefully with well-practiced distraction techniques." "Oh, I am quite busy with my sewing, Aunt. What lovely weather we are having, don't you think?" "Is that a robin in the garden?" "Any distraction will do." Meanwhile, your cousins smirk into their teacups, having already completed their own rounds of questioning, or, better still, having married and become the interrogators themselves. When talk slows, someone inevitably brings up the latest local scandal. A runaway servant, a neighbour's dog caught digging up the flower bed, or, heaven forbid, your imagined affection for the vicar's son. The gossip mixes with the steam from the teapot, sweetened with sugar and malicious intent, yet somehow you must endure it. The scones vanish, the cake is conquered, and Aunt Martha, briefly satisfied, moves on to finding fault with someone else's posture. You escape the moment, manners permit, your nerves frayed but intact, promising never to attend tea again until tomorrow, when the whole ritual is repeated. Afternoon tea, where drinking remains optional, but survival is absolutely necessary. Your afternoons are reserved for charity work, which mostly involves sitting in cold church halls, pretending to care for orphans and stitching things no orphan ever asked for. Victorian charity is less about transforming lives and more about improving your standing. In a society where idleness is a disgrace and self-improvement is everyone's second job, doing good deeds turns into elaborate public theatre. The setting is always the same, the local church or parish room, where the temperature is best described as spiritual refrigeration, and the decor consists mainly of uncomfortable folding chairs, stern-looking portraits, and a faint smell of old wool. You arrive on time, your arms laden with impressive stacks of half-finished knitting, bolts of plain cloth, and at least one copy of Moral Lessons for the Young. Around you, a group of women settles into the serious task of relieving poverty, which mostly means arguing over who deserves help, the deserving poor versus the merely unfortunate, and which local families' children are most in need of knitted socks. The actual orphans are nowhere to be seen, presumably living their lives away from scratchy blankets and unneeded advice. The first item on the agenda is always a meeting led by the pastor's wife or the town's most daunting older woman. Reports are read aloud, plans are made, and you debate the yearly charity fair arrangements, a confusion of decorative items, home-baked goods, and hand-stitched bookmarks. Someone proposes a cake stand, someone else objects, citing last year's fruitcake almost causing a dental emergency. Someone suggests a raffle. A third person protests, worried it might encourage gambling among the lower classes. Then the sewing starts. You are assigned to hem pillowcases for the local hospital or embroider initials on blankets for unknown recipients. You wonder privately if these items ever reach their intended homes, or if they just pile up in the rectory closet, waiting for the next group of well-meaning volunteers. No one ever bothers to ask the orphans what they actually require. Certainly not another irritating scarf. Naturally, the true point of this assembly is companionship. The sewing circle functions less as a humanitarian machine and more as an exclusive social club with added buttons. Over the gentle clicking of knitting needles, local happenings and major scandals are shared in hushed tones. Did you hear about Miss Peterson's embarrassing moment with the milkman? Lady Morrison's new hat is quite shocking. And naturally, has anyone seen the assistant pastor recently? He looked rather pale. If you are feeling rebellious, you bring up foreign causes, starving children in far-off conflicts, orphans in neighbouring nations. But these receive polite acknowledgement and a swift return to local gossip. There is always one woman who takes her charitable work too seriously. She brings charts, organises contests for the most handkerchiefs finished, and once suggested making house calls to personally deliver socks to a widower, which everyone agreed was going too far. You meanwhile struggle to keep your stitches even while fighting yawns and occasionally pricking your finger just for a bit of feeling. As the afternoon ends, there is tea, lukewarm and served from a cracked pot, along with stale biscuits, and a talk on the virtues of self-sacrifice. You nod wisely, fighting the urge to ask if you could sacrifice yourself directly into a warm bath. The pastor thanks everyone for their hard work. Someone makes a joke about idle ladies, and you collect your sewing and slip away, your cheeks pink from a mix of minor achievement and extreme boredom. Congratulations. Another afternoon spent saving the world one unimportant seam at a time. You may never see the results of your good deeds, but you have certainly given the town something to talk about. Until next week's meeting. If you are a mother, an aunt, or an unlucky older sister, you are responsible for small humans with powerful personalities. This means guiding, rewarding, and arranging ceasefires with individuals who still believe in imaginary creatures. Victorian children may look angelic in their little sailor suits and stiff aprons, but don't be fooled. They are miniature balls of chaos with the energy of a marathon runner and negotiating skills that match Victorian lawyers. The day begins early, usually with high-pitched cries from the nursery suggesting someone has eaten the decorative fruit, or more likely tested whether their doll floats in the chamber pot. The nursery is your battlefield, and your resources are limited. Serious looks, empty threats, and a very large tin of hard candies. The governess is technically in charge, but if you are the closest adult, or worse, the only adult present, you become the final authority on all arguments, minor injuries and moral emergencies. You act as judge, jury, and on truly awful days as an amateur doctor with a bit of lavender oil and a vague knowledge of leeches. Morning tasks require strategic planning. Unplanned time is an invitation to disaster. So you assign tasks with military precision. Building blocks for the oldest, hoops and sticks for the middle ones, and for the youngest, supervised cat watching. Everyone has a job. No one, especially the cat, wants to do it. Breakfast is a test of endurance and diplomacy. You attempt to persuade porridge into small mouths while fending off complaints about the texture, the heat, and the philosophical puzzle of why jam is not on offer. At least 2 cups are knocked over, someone's toast ends up under the furniture, and a small revolt breaks out when you announce no honey until after school work. If you manage to leave breakfast without porridge in your hair or jam on your clothes, you are ahead of the game. Lessons start, and suddenly every child is a master of distraction. Mathematics brings tears, spelling incites rebellion, and anything in French causes a fear normally reserved for wild animals. You have never seen anyone develop a severe aversion to penmanship so quickly. Half the time you are unsure if you are teaching the alphabet or managing a slow-motion conflict over who gets the best writing slate. Outside time is next. Victorian tradition insists children need fresh air and physical activity, preferably where neighbours can observe your parenting skills. You bundle the children into coats, hats, gloves, and on difficult days, scarves so bulky they look like mobile snowmen. The walk to the park is an expedition. Puddles are magnetic, dogs are irresistible, and everyone insists on collecting the kind of stick that would make a Victorian mother faint. If it rains, which, this being England, it does, the children are confined to the play area where their creativity expresses itself through complicated schemes, secret organisations, and occasionally highly forbidden indoor cricket. You spend the afternoons settling disagreements, enforcing rules, and occasionally buying peace with extra sweet treats. By late afternoon, energy levels are high and patience is low. You read stories, play shadow games, and hope that tales of good behaviour somehow soak in through magic. Children are finally handed over to the governess for the formal evening cleaning, a process that results in clean faces, wet carpets, and, on one memorable event, a lost frog. Supervision is less about maintaining authority and more about surviving until they go to sleep without losing your voice, your sanity, or your last piece of candy. Victorian children, with their lace collars and mischievous grins, are both your greatest delight and your greatest challenge. You emerge from the nursery exhausted but victorious, ready for grown-up conversation and, if you are lucky, a few moments of actual silence. Until tomorrow, when the battle resumes, and the small humans with their opinions, their demands, and their amazing accuracy with utensils rise once more. You are single. How fortunate for you. Every social event is a trap filled with available men, clumsy dances and unexplained marks on your gloves. You must appear charming, engaged, and absolutely not desperate, even when your future depends on it entirely. The Victorian system for finding a husband is essentially a dangerous game of chess, played in full skirts, with every mother watching from the sidelines. From the moment you are declared ready to marry, every outing, every afternoon tea, or every garden stroll becomes a strategic chance for romantic progress, or, just as likely, social humiliation. Let us begin with the introductions. You meet potential partners in situations designed to maximize awkwardness. A relative's garden party, the yearly church event, or a dance where the light is dim enough to hide minor flaws, but bright enough to make bad footwork obvious. Every suitable gentleman is introduced with a quick summary of his prospects. Owns a modest property in the country from a fine family, or sometimes simply remarkably good at card games. None of these facts guarantee an interesting conversation or a future free from marital unhappiness. The dance floor is where true characters are revealed. You must navigate a confusing series of formal dances while avoiding direct eye contact with anyone's mother. One incorrect step could lead to a scandal or worse, a marriage proposal from Mr. Thompson, who faintly smells of vegetables and has not blinked since last autumn. Your gloves gather peculiar markings, ink blots, fruit stains, possibly regret, as you try to project serene composure and not seem at all flustered by a narrowly averted encounter with your mother's second cousin. Next comes the drawing room chat, where prospective partners try to sound insightful, and you are required to laugh gently at set intervals, all the while privately assessing if respectable teeth and a dependable income truly form the basis for a life together. The demands of correct behaviour are tiring. Flirting needs to be visible enough to signal your interest, yet subtle enough to avoid any hint of criticism. A nervous giggle or a remark slightly too forthright immediately becomes the next day's parlour gossip. If you aren't careful, you might end up seated beside a man determined to describe his insect collection for 60 uninterrupted minutes. Congratulations. Your courting experience is, quite literally, a tightrope walk. There are also notes exchanged discreetly beneath the constant gaze of a chaperone. Each message employs a careful code. Since expressing too much or too little can result in rumours, confusion, or highly uncomfortable discussions with your mother, you cherish a fragile pressed flower tucked inside the pages, or you must decipher if "respectfully yours" signifies true affection or merely neat handwriting. Your family, naturally, tracks your every move. Your mother seems to possess a supernatural talent for spotting unsuitable matches, while your father's main condition is simply that your suitor avoids financially ruining the family or accidentally setting fire to the stables. Aunt Martha, meanwhile, keeps an accurate tally of every available bachelor and is quite willing to introduce you to all of them in a single afternoon. The consequences feel impossibly significant. One incorrect choice leaves you single, condemned to a lifetime of needlework and assisting with other people's children. Every single moment necessitates a fine balance. Show interest but not desperation. Be clever but not overly so. Display your embroidery, but be cautious not to appear too diligent, lest you seem to be seeking employment instead of a spouse. You dream of a husband who sees past your dowry or your family name, but you'd settle for one who can discuss something other than farm animals. Occasionally, a truly decent prospect appears, kind, moderately attractive, and with only a slight tendency to sweat through his collar. Perhaps he even bothers to inquire about your personal interests or shares a fondness for a new novel. But hesitate and you will miss your chance. The Victorian marriage market is less a vast ocean and more a small puddle, and the competition remains fierce. Ultimately, successfully navigating the suitor challenge focuses less on finding genuine love and more on avoiding public disgrace with your reputation unscathed. If you emerge with only a few awkward marriage proposals, some confusing poetry, and all your gloves accounted for, consider yourself a champion of the long-standing Victorian courtship ritual. The true feat of Victorian social life is avoiding any social misstep that leads to a scandal. This demands expertly navigating the many rules concerning hats, gloves, correspondence, unaccompanied walks, and being seen with the wrong family member at the wrong moment. Welcome to the subtle art of Victorian self-preservation, where one mistake can turn you from a respectable young lady into the afternoon's cautionary tale quicker than you can utter turtle soup. Scandal waits behind every lace drape. To keep clear of it, you must maintain a level of awareness that would exhaust a secret agent. First, the clothing requirements. Hats must be worn outdoors, but may the heavens help you if you forget to remove yours once inside. Gloves are mandatory for all outings. Yes, even a brief stroll in the garden. If you are observed bare-handed, expect a week of speculation concerning your rebellious nature. Buttons must be correctly fastened, shoelaces tied, and most crucially, nothing under any circumstance should hint at the existence of an ankle. Then there are the regulations for letters. Correspondence with men requires rigorous supervision. If you are sent a note, it must pass through your mother, the household butler, and likely the entire village before you can safely read it. Even the colour of the ink is judged. Black is proper, blue is deemed slightly bold, and anything scented will cause an uproar in the parlour. Regarding the seal, do not even consider using an affectionate image unless your intention is to have your romantic hopes dissected over tea for the next 10 years. Chaperones themselves form an entire industry dedicated to preventing scandal. Wish to take a walk? Bring a chaperone. Wish to visit friends? Chaperone. Wish to look at a gentleman in public? Better hope your great-aunt is nearby, prepared to intervene between you and ruin. The unaccompanied walk is the original forbidden temptation. One participation and your good name is destroyed. Never mind that your only companion was a perfectly behaved sheepdog. Dining poses its own series of hazards. A single mistake at the dinner table can destroy your social standing. Soup must be sipped quietly, never noisily slurped. Bread is broken by hand, not cut with a knife. Napkins belong in your lap. Never, under any circumstances, should they be tucked into your collar like a radical from the continent. And for the love of propriety, do not let your spoon make a noise, or someone will suggest you are prone to nervous fits. But the ultimate danger is being seen. Seen with the incorrect person at the incorrect time in the incorrect location. A walk with a second cousin after the sun sets is sufficient to send the rumour mill into a frenzy. Two unmarried people chatting in a greenhouse. Scandal. Being caught laughing too loudly with the pastor's nephew. A serious scandal, and quite possibly a surprise engagement. If you are truly unlucky, the scandal may not even be your fault. A sneeze during the church service, a stumble over your skirt on the main street, or a regrettable incident involving a runaway hat can all earn you a temporary exile from social life. Damage control is a vital skill. Apologies must be immediate, humble, and preferably delivered by your mother. You will need to master the "it was all a simple misunderstanding" expression and develop a broad collection of vague explanations. Sometimes you simply must wait patiently. Scandal has the shelf life of fresh milk, and eventually someone else will trip over the lawn hose or drop their coin purse in the duck pond. The most painful aspect? Scandal rarely relates to what you actually did. It is about what people imagine you might have done. Guilt by mere association, suspicion based on proximity. The best you can hope for is to successfully complete the social season with your dignity, your dance card, and your reputation unscathed. So you move cautiously through the day, gloved, chaperoned, and alert around soup, knowing that at any given moment, history might remember you as the young woman who set the standard for social disgrace with nothing more than an untimely sneeze and a slightly provocative hat ribbon. Victorian life. Come for the tea, stay for the daily test of endurance. Evening brings the next major event. Dinner. It is a 3-hour sequence of courses, each one more perplexing than the last. You are expected to keep up with both the collection of silverware and the flow of conversation, all while never admitting your strong dislike for gelatin. A Victorian dinner is not just a meal, it is a test. A magnificent, sparkling performance that challenges the theatrical skills of every member of the family. By the time you take your seat, you have already endured a change of outfit, a pre-dinner glass of sherry, and at least one serious lecture on the correct method for folding a napkin. Now positioned at one edge of a table long enough for a small plane to land on, you are both a guest and a spectacle. The first hurdle is the arrangement of the place setting. There are more forks than you have fingers, a formidable selection of spoons, and at least 3 knives, each designated for different, equally mysterious food items. You have studied the etiquette manuals, so you recall to begin with the outside utensils and work your way inward, but there is always one unexpected implement, typically the small fish fork, waiting to reveal you as a culinary fraud. Water glasses reflect light accusingly. Bread plates seem to mock you from your left side, or possibly your right, depending on who last organised the seating. And then the procession begins. Course after course arrives, each one more complicated and strange than the last. Soup, served at the temperature of molten rock, is delicately sipped with absolute restraint. Fish follows, usually accompanied by a sauce that is either wonderful or deeply suspicious, and you never determine which until it is too late. There is a roasted meat, a mysterious pastry, a selection of vegetables boiled until tasteless, and if your luck is truly bad, a trembling, oddly jiggling mound of gelatin that everyone pretends to enjoy thoroughly. Conversation proves just as complicated as the menu. The hostess guides the discussion with expert skill, steering the talk toward harmless topics. Weather conditions, international news, or the moderate success of the hydrangeas in the West Garden. Men discuss politics in hushed, polite tones while women exchange carefully chosen compliments. What an original choice of gown you've selected this season. You are required to give a polite chuckle, agree, and contribute precisely the correct remark. Too much risks appearing argumentative. Too little makes you seem uninteresting. Light conversation becomes a careful manoeuvre. Each anecdote must be amusing without being offensive. Mention a relative's engagement, but make absolutely certain the match is respectable. Refer to last weekend's ball, but avoid mentioning whose dress was accidentally ripped. When an uncomfortable silence descends, quickly deploy the reliable fallback question. Isn't this broth simply delightful? A query no one will answer honestly. Then there is the issue of time. Dinner proceeds at the pace of social anxiety, too slowly for your hungry stomach, too quickly for discreet garden escapes. Just when you believe it is finally over, the staff appears with yet another dish. Wild poultry, cold roasted meat, a dessert steamed beyond recognition, and then, at last, the cheese selection. You approach the cheese like an exhausted runner reaching the finish line, only to realise there are still sweets, various drinks, and one final course remaining. Throughout the entire event, you are performing, maintaining straight posture, keeping your fingers spotless and projecting a calm demeanour. Dislike something? Smile and manage at least one polite nibble. Then skillfully move the food around on your plate to create the illusion that you have eaten. Never flat out refuse a dish. Such poor manners could be a source of family stories for decades to come. Eventually the grand meal concludes, drinks are poured, the chatter softens, and guests slowly migrate toward the drawing room, relieved to have survived another test of dining endurance. Your stomach is full, your mind is dulled, and you are already anticipating tomorrow's leftovers. Dinner. More than simple sustenance, it is advanced instruction in survival techniques and feigning appreciation for jellied meats. Mission accomplished. You are now certified for a lifetime of small talk and perhaps a furtive late-night snack. You cannot simply go to bed. Next comes a series of parlour entertainments, mandatory dramatic readings, and acting games so contrived you would genuinely prefer scrubbing out the lavatory. You will politely giggle at the same predictable jokes every single night, because the alternative is to be labelled a troublemaker. Victorian evenings extend endlessly with mandatory merriment, all for the betterment of society. The dinner bell barely finishes ringing before you are gently ushered to the sitting room, where the furniture has been subtly rearranged, and everyone's polite facade is stretched to its limit. There is no escaping to your room with a book, not until you have endured 2 hours of wholesome, mildly competitive and frequently baffling entertainment. The host, with disturbing cheerfulness, introduces the activities as if unveiling cosmic secrets. Acting games, understandably, remain a constant favourite among new guests. Victorian charades involves less wild gesturing and more presenting short scenes from classic literature, poems, or plays. If you have never tried miming the Lady of Shalott while Aunt Bertha loudly guesses, "Vegetables, it must be vegetables," then congratulations, your ordeal is yet to come. Enter the parlour challenges, each one carefully designed to encourage good spirits while setting up potential opportunities for humiliation. The Parson's Cat is a classic game. Players describe the imaginary feline using a new adjective, moving alphabetically. The Parson's Cat is an agreeable cat, a bothersome cat, a cranky cat, until someone loses track or uses a ridiculous word like bilious, prompting polite laughter and minor embarrassment. Should charades and word puzzles fail to generate sufficient enthusiasm, dramatic recitations are next. This is the moment when the family's aspiring performer, usually a relative with a strong passion for metre and rhythm, fully unleashes their obsession with Shakespeare. You sit through countless lines of ancient sea poetry delivered with such intensity you half expect the rug to catch fire. There is always a lull when Uncle Harold suggests something lighter, only to be met with fervent excerpts from Macbeth. The display receives loud applause from several confused family members who were hoping for comedy. Music may follow, the piano is opened, sheet music rustles, and you silently pray you will not be asked to participate again. The youngest relative performs a piece from yesterday's lesson. The eldest cousin sings a long ballad that lasts longer than the dinner itself, while everyone hums along pretending to be in tune. In the best-case scenario, the household dog stays quiet, though he usually joins in with more genuine enthusiasm than anyone else present. Occasionally, someone suggests blindfolded running or flaming raisin games that offer a real possibility of injury and genuine excitement. More often, evenings conclude with 20 questions, which inevitably devolves into arguments over whether an ostrich can be categorized as furniture or forfeits, which are basically excuses to force people to sing, dance, or publicly recite a silly verse. Through all of this, you maintain a polite smile and chuckle appropriately, successfully avoiding accusations of being unsociable. You applaud all performances, feign surprise at unexpected plot developments, and eagerly offer guesses while silently counting the minutes until you are free. No one dares to suggest the simple act of sitting quietly, risking being labelled a malcontent or worse, being forced to return to word games with Aunt Bertha. Finally, the clock strikes a moment of relief, the games stop, the room is put back in order, and you are permitted to retire. Your face muscles aching from forced amusement, and your spirits slightly weary. But you have fulfilled your social duties, endured the mandatory entertainment, kept the peace, and maintained the delicate Victorian illusion that charades, parlour games, and dramatic readings represent the pinnacle of human enjoyment. Very well done. You have survived another evening of compulsory celebration. Rest well. Tomorrow might require the Lady of Shalott again, so be prepared. At last. You seize these valuable private moments for writing in your journal, offering a silent prayer, and privately despairing that your entire day has been under scrutiny by your neighbours. The house finally grows quiet. No more forced parlour entertainment, no more obligatory applause, and for 30 blessed minutes, no one is hovering to criticise your posture or inquire about your letters. You settle by the flickering candlelight at your small writing desk, a worn but beloved notebook open, and an inkwell that always somehow manages to smudge your nose. Writing remains your sacred ritual, a tiny rebellion against a day spent performing for the whole world. This is your only authentic space left, although your frankest entries truly resemble small catalogues of complaint and inventories of near catastrophe. Tuesday. You entirely escaped Aunt Bertha's matchmaking by simply feigning unconsciousness. It was almost worth the accompanying headache. The soup on the menu once again featured aspic. You spill details nobody else could possibly grasp. The torture of stays tightened 2 inches too much. The small victory of remembering the proper utensils at supper, and the pure thrill of pilfering preserves undetected from the pantry. Your journal's official voice always stays grateful and measured, but the undertone screams pure, concentrated exhaustion. You catalogue your blessings, a reasonable state of health, despite your blisters and persistent existential gloom, a decent family even with their strange post-dinner poetry habits, and shelter overhead preferably completely rodent-free. For the sake of future readers, you include polite lines about the satisfaction of needlework and properly maintained houseplants. But underneath, your private journal serves as an important emotional release valve. Here you finally admit that endless social visits, perfectly pressed linens, and marathon rounds of charades do not actually constitute your definition of happiness. You secretly record your secret worries. Will mother ever fully approve of my current hair accessories? Did anyone actually notice my near-napkin fumble during dinner? What if I perish unexpectedly and they decide to publish this publicly? Dear Journal, today was lovely. There's the hidden version. Dear Journal, today was merely bearable. Writing also generously provides a private dreaming space. You outline your secret ambitions, plans for continental travel, novel publication under bold pseudonyms, or on rebellious nights, simply purchasing personal millinery without committee consultation. The writing process, slow and entirely intentional, reminds you that you still possess an independent mind. Even after spending entire afternoons pretending interest in Aunt Augusta's embroidery samples, sometimes you attempt philosophy. Does life truly offer more than household bookkeeping and birthday remembrance? Can someone be perfectly mannered and completely satisfied simultaneously, or must you always choose? You exhale, recognizing that Victorian society is fundamentally built on compromise artistry between public expectations and personal truth, reputation, and true identity. As the single flame dims, your eyelids droop and your careful penmanship deteriorates from a careful script into exhausted scribbling. You conclude your entries with vague hopes for slightly less tiring, more meaningful tomorrows, or minimally reduced encounters with aspic. You shut the journal with a snap, secure it in your locked compartment, and savour this moment of privacy, a commodity rarer than gems in a world where even your thoughts need respectability. Using your remaining energy, you slip into bed and let your mind completely drift, comforted by knowing that for a few nightly minutes you exist solely for yourself. Sleep thankfully arrives as a gentle mercy, and tomorrow will bring the same repetition with slightly more cleverness, more determination, and slightly more existential anxiety. Congratulations! You have survived another Victorian day, documented secret truths, and quietly preserved your unique spirit. Before fully retiring, you must remove all the hairpins, say your evening prayers, and possibly negotiate with the Almighty for dreams that are completely corset-free. Bedtime itself becomes a whole ordeal, and rest more closely resembles social experimentation than certainty. Evening in Victorian households arrives softly but never without its complications. Candlelight dances gently against the wallpaper. The house groans while settling, and you realise your day is far from finished. There is the rigid, unwinding routine, a ritual gauntlet designed to ensure both physical and moral cleanliness, plus reasonable odds of surviving until morning without becoming tomorrow's biggest scandal. Hair care comes first. Victorian hairstyling necessitates engineering, needing roughly 30 minutes nightly for dismantling. You start slowly removing a tiny weapon collection of pins, anywhere from 15 to 50, depending on the day's supposedly simple arrangement. Hopefully none of them will drop into the wash basin. You brush your hair with long, purposeful strokes, 100 if you're actively seeking sainthood or maternal approval, trying hard not to consider how many family secrets might be tangled in the strands. After hair comes the face cleansing, which is always a shocking experience. The water always stays cold, the soap feels suspiciously chunky, and the towel could easily substitute as sandpaper. You wash away the daily powder and your concerns, watching your reflection in the murky mirror while attempting to scrub off lingering breakfast conversation anxieties. Once your face returns somewhat to its original condition, you examine your skin for any fresh blemishes, as if each one represents a personal failure or spinsterhood omens. Now, for the spiritual segment, your evening prayers. You kneel dutifully beside your bed, hands clasped tightly, reciting identical memorized passages you've mumbled since childhood. But tonight, maybe you sneak in some personal requests, something about increased patience with Aunt Bertha, miraculous jam stain remedies, and perhaps just once, dreams where you wear pants and do something genuinely scandalous like riding a bicycle or refusing second aspic helpings. Bedtime itself quickly becomes an event. The bed forms a blanket and pillow fortress, built specifically against the notorious English cold. You slide carefully between chilled linens, actively avoiding patches that were missed by the warming bottle. If you are especially lucky, your bedroom fire might still glow faintly. Otherwise, you just try to convince yourself that shivering builds character. But sleep frequently eludes the Victorian mind. Instead, you lie wide awake, cataloguing all the daily embarrassments and tomorrow's various worries. Did you bid Lady Prescott farewell or good evening at tea? Did you properly remember winding the clock, shutting the window, and hiding your journal from your nosy siblings? Your brain races through endless social calculations, each one more disastrous than the previous, until you finally surrender and listen to the wind rattling the window panes. In those final drowsy moments, you face the existential dread accompanying Victorian womanhood, the sensation that your life is constantly displayed, your value measured primarily in manners, and even in the darkness, someone might be judging your snoring. You seek peace knowing that for now, you've survived mostly intact and only slightly traumatized by jellied meat. Eventually, your thoughts slow down, your body relaxes completely, and you drift away, hoping for nights free of corset dreams, public scandals, or accidentally addressing the minister as mother. Congratulations! You have successfully completed the nightly rituals. Tomorrow morning brings fresh starts, armed with your hairbrush, a prayer, and the faint hope for slightly less existential bedtimes. Sleep well in Victorian England. That's truthfully all anyone can reasonably expect. Catch a cold, and you are instantly bedridden, surrounded by concerned relatives and a rotating cast of questionable medical authorities. You'll receive treatments ranging from harsh mustard compresses to complete and total denial. The very first signs of illness, a sneeze, a cough, or a complaint of chilliness, sends entire households into panic mode. News spreads much faster than actual germs. Within moments, your mother, the housekeeper, and a minimum of 3 aunts cluster around your bedside, clutching handkerchiefs and reciting family medical wisdom. You absolutely must rest, they constantly demand, while simultaneously requesting detailed recalls of your recent meals, yesterday's total fresh air intake, and whether your feet encountered any moisture. Victorian sick days equally balance maximum drama and total inconvenience. The sick room is prepared with the urgency of a royal birth. Curtains are immediately closed, the scent of camphor quickly fills the air, and someone delivers trays containing weak tea and plain toast. The fire burns at oddly punishing temperatures, as if perspiration universally heals all ailments. You're tucked under sufficient blankets to entirely suffocate your symptoms and your breathing hopes. A bell stays within easy reach, not for summoning comfort, but for calling more symptom interrogators. Now enter the home treatments, as relatives rotate through humour-drawing remedies. Someone quickly produces patent medicine bottles promising relief for cold, cough, rickets, and possibly original sin itself. It tastes exactly like liquid leather polish and burns all the way down. Failing that, there are the popular mustard plasters, applied with the gentleness of masonry. It burns, itches intensely, and leaves you questioning whether the cures actually punish the complaints. Medical professionals, if eventually summoned, arrive bearing their own personal horrors. The family physician dangerously combines wisdom and gambling, ready to prescribe everything from bloodsuckers for certainty to system-cleansing purgatives. The less fortunate might encounter neighbours with strong homeopathic tendencies recommending everything from lavender compresses to fresh onions worn around your neck. You comply, mainly because resistance demands more energy than you currently have available, and you're already half convinced you're dying from sheer tedium. Meanwhile, family members debate loudly over your bedside, all in carefully modulated whispers. Is it merely a minor ailment or something much more hanging on? Should you actually be permitted to read, or will the thrill of a romance novel immediately throw you into delirium? Each cup of tea is given with the solemn gravity of medicine. Every cough is met with great worry, immediate guidance, or in Aunt Bertha's specific case, an endless story about how she almost died from a cold, but was ultimately rescued by brisk walks and a shocking amount of bacon grease. Rest is the official treatment, but genuine sleep remains completely elusive. The door squeaks open every 10 minutes, servants tending to the fire, brothers and sisters sneaking a quick peek, family members just ensuring you're still among the living. The only true quiet comes in the early morning hours when you can finally lie still, wrapped securely in your fortress of blankets, and dream of a world where a touch of the sniffles is met with nothing more than a peaceful nap and a pile of scandalous books. Getting better is equally dramatic in its own way. you're immediately praised for your courage. Such a model patient who barely complained at all. And you're gently guided back into your household duties, though strictly banned from strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. Unless, of course, you're suddenly needed for a particularly tedious social visit. Well done. You've successfully endured the Victorian sick day, medicated, overheated, questioned, and finally released back into society. And if that cough still lingers, you'd better definitely keep it quiet. Trust me, you absolutely don't want to repeat this ordeal until at least Christmas. Underneath all those layers of manners and ruffles, every single Victorian woman keeps her secret delights and forbidden pleasures close. Whether it's sneaking candy, reading highly prohibited books, or simply fantasizing about a world where trousers are finally acceptable attire. On the surface, your entire existence is an endless march of proper behaviour, refined skills, and polite self-control. But behind every perfectly arranged lace curtain lies a whole hidden world. The reality is, even the most respectable young lady has her guilty indulgences, and more often than not, she's become quite skilled at completely concealing them. Let's quickly begin with the most obvious: sweets. Officially, you only consume sugar during strictly approved mealtimes and always with a required moderation expected of someone whose figure is constantly under public examination. But oh, the intense excitement of slipping an extra chocolate from the sitting room dish when no one is looking, or grabbing a quick handful of crystallized violets from the jar Aunt Prudence believes is purely decorative. Some nights, you and your most reliable friend might even sneak into the pantry for a spoonful of illicit preserves. Shocking, delightfully messy, and absolutely worth the risk of detection. If anyone happens to notice the missing sugar, you simply point your fingers at the children. The children, the cat, or perhaps that mysterious draft. Books readily offer another path to the forbidden. You prominently display a proper volume on your bedside table, perhaps the young lady's manual for moral improvement or wise sayings for every situation, but safely hidden underneath, fully concealed from any curious eyes, lies a well-worn copy of the latest thriller. Sensational tales of murder, mystery, and heroines who finally dare to have real emotions. Maybe you trade books with your bolder friends, each of you mastering the careful art of disguising your reading material in plain brown wrappers when anyone draws near. If you are particularly daring, you might even own a smuggled French novel, snuck from a relative's luggage and read by flickering candlelight, your pulse racing with every page turn. And then there's the enduring clothing fantasy, pants. The simple, wonderful freedom of not having to wrestle with 7 pounds of petticoats every time you want to sit down or exit a room quickly. It's not just purely about ease, it's about vividly imagining walking quickly through the large garden, scaling a tree, or heaven help us all, actually running just for pure joy. In your most private moments, you clearly picture an alternate reality where ladies can freely wear trousers, possess useful pockets, and aren't constantly judged for what's inside them. But not all secrets are so harmless. Some women maintain a secret supply of calming drops or a private bottle of wine for those especially challenging afternoons enduring family chaos or Aunt Bertha's terrible piano performances. You might keep a hidden collection of passionate letters, old love notes, unsigned poems, or a single message from a potential suitor that you treasure more for the thrill of the excitement than the actual romance. For the few artistically gifted, there are forbidden drawings, caricatures of your family, fanciful designs for hats you'd never dare wear in public, or even a surprisingly realistic sketch of the groundskeeper. Strictly for artistic practice only, naturally. Then there are all the aspirations that never leave your diary, secret goals, dreams of grand adventure, writing, performing on a stage, or becoming an explorer in a world that only pretends to permit such things for women. Sometimes you sketch your future self on horseback, behind a podium, or simply alone in a quiet room where nobody questions your activities. The simple fact that these must remain secret reveals much more about society than about you. Still, the best kept secret is often simply the pure joy of solitude, 10 stolen minutes in the peaceful garden, a few precious pages read in the storage room, a private laugh at an absurd hat, or a whispered joke with a trusted friend who deeply understands just how ridiculous all this propriety truly is. And so, while the outside world continually observes a perfect model of decorum, inside you fiercely maintain a rich, private existence. A world of small rebellions, secret pleasures and powerful dreams that make the corsets, the idle chatter and even the awful gelatin entirely worth tolerating. Because what nobody truly acknowledges is that being a Victorian woman is a masterclass in endurance, and the real entertainment always happens after everyone else has gone to bed. Every proper Victorian woman requires her fresh air, which is precisely why you are now undertaking a morning stroll that is equal parts necessary exercise and competitive social performance. With your guardian 2 paces dutifully behind, and your parasol positioned just right, you glide down the avenue at the exact pace that proudly declares, "I'm above gossip, but certainly not above critiquing your bonnet." Walking is significantly less about fitness, and much more about maximum visibility, ideally by all the proper people, and definitely never by anyone hawking fish loudly. The preparations for an appropriate walk rival those of a small military campaign. First, you must choose a dress that is sufficiently stylish, but not so incredibly striking that it immediately invites whispers from the neighbours. Gloves are strictly mandatory, preferably spotless, since nothing screams fallen woman like grass stains on your fingertips. Your shoes must be suitable for cobblestones, yet delicate enough to strongly suggest you've never once chased a carriage in your entire existence. And absolutely do not overlook your hat, positioned at precisely the right angle to frame your face in a way that implies both modest virtue and just the slightest hint of intrigue. Your chaperone, whether it's your mother, aunt, or mildly disapproving family friend, examines your entire ensemble with eyes sharp enough to effortlessly slice silk. She fixes your neckline, clicks her tongue at a single wayward curl, and equips herself with a purse large enough to hold smelling salts, a small prayer book, and enough mints to sustain both of you until noon. Out from the dwelling you step as a cohesive duo, though clearly not as equals. The pavement instantly transforms into a lively stage. This isn't merely a simple stroll. You are engaging in the elaborate performance of community life. Every matron in her window, every wandering child, every shop owner polishing their front window acts as both observer and judge. You offer agreeable nods to familiar faces, exchange meticulously calibrated smiles with potential rivals, and extend a subtle acknowledgement to any companion not currently facing suspicion of misconduct. This procession operates by specific rules. Never move so fast as to appear rushed. What precisely are you fleeing? Yet, never dawdle either, lest someone imagine you're lingering for attention or, heaven forbid, hoping to glimpse that new employee at the millinery. Navigating the footpath evolves into its own contest, a subtle choreography of stepping aside, pressing forward, and deftly evading any hint of genuine exertion. The only risk greater than tripping on loose paving stones is making visual contact with the local purveyor of fish, who might loudly offer greetings that include particulars regarding your household's purchases of cod, a social disaster. The sunshade, in the meantime, offers more than shelter from the sunlight. It stands as your finest decoration. You twirl it with refined ease, utilising it to convey disapproval with a sharp closure, curiosity with a gentle leaning toward a particularly fashionable pedestrian, or absolute terror when a stray dog comes too near, or worse still, a lone gentleman. The artistry of handling the parasol lies in communicating volumes while maintaining silence. If good fortune favours you, your route will take you through the grounds, where you can admire the floral arrangements, participate in brief, suitably dull conversation with other walkers, and be scrutinised by precisely the right number of available bachelors, neither more nor less. You halt to watch the waterfowl, which are less critical than your neighbours, and share inoffensive rumours with your companion, who somehow manages to make inquiries about someone's cultivating of roses sound like stern warnings about spiritual corruption. Difficulties are always present. A sudden downpour threatens to undo your hairstyle and destroy your composure. A runaway youngster nearly collides with your attire, prompting gasps and pronouncements about appropriate conduct. You skillfully avoid stepping in anything that could soil your footwear or your standing. The journey concludes with a triumphant return home, cheeks lightly tinted, reputation intact, and just enough breeze in your headwear to imply that, yes, you have embraced the natural world. Your escort declares the outing a success. No fainting spells, no scandal, and not one fish seller observed. Well done. You have promenaded down the thoroughfare for utterly no practical reason, executed the complex ritual of respectable Victorian behaviour, and returned victorious. Until the following day, when the performance commences again and your sunshade awaits, prepared for its next role. If you are fortunate enough to possess a green space, congratulations. You found the era's most sanctioned excuse to work the soil and pretend you are too engaged to respond to intrusive questions about marriage prospects. Victorian gardening focuses less on growing produce and more on competing for the honour of having the most superfluous rosebush. You kneel in the earth trimming blossoms and nourishing a deep, quiet rivalry with Mrs. Pennywhistle next door, whose flowers are frankly impertinent. In the opinion of society, tending a garden represents the single truly virtuous pastime. Unlike musical pursuits, which risk becoming too expressive, or reading, which might inspire dangerous concepts, caring for your flower beds is an unquestionable sign of virtuous character. It also offers a rare opportunity for honest physical activity, although you must, of course, never admit to deriving pleasure from it. The entire undertaking follows a precise protocol. Kneel upon a cushion to prevent soiling your gown, wear hand coverings to protect your delicate hands, and wield your small shovel with the refined manner of someone who has definitely studied horticulture in the women's periodicals. The garden becomes a canvas for your ambitions, frustrations, and social goals. Every border, every climbing vine, every suspiciously exotic plant signifies both a personal success and a not-so-subtle message to guests. Yes, I possess refinement. No, I did not murder my spouse and into him beneath the fragrant vine, regardless of Mrs. Pennywhistle's insinuations. The selection of plants provokes endless debate. Bellflowers for modesty, purple flowers for humility, a solitary dramatic bloom for a touch of intrigue if the situation warrants. Naturally, the genuine impetus for gardening is strategic. There is no superior justification for avoiding an awkward afternoon tea or dodging a persistent admirer than claiming the climbing flowers simply cannot be neglected another moment. You can always disappear behind the thick bushes when Aunt Bertha's spotted approaching, shears in hand and your most contemplative expression prepared. Few dare to interrupt a woman who is clearly on a mission to conquer plant blight and overbearing relatives in a single afternoon. But be clear, gardening is also conflict. Your most formidable adversary always resides adjacent. Mrs. Pennywhistle has dedicated years to perfecting her boundaries, circulating rumours about your plants and making questionable assertions about her award-winning soil enhancement. You pretend not to notice when she leans over the barrier to criticise your weeding techniques or offers uninvited counsel about the appropriate depth for planting small bulbs. Sometimes she appears to be pruning her own flowers, but you are aware she is actually counting your blooms. And honestly, you have engaged in precisely the same behaviour, perhaps with a slightly haughtier demeanour. Despite the competition, gardening provides a rare sanctuary of calm in your busy routine. The scent of fresh dirt, the soft sound of flying insects, and the occasional excitement of finding a perfect, unobserved earth dweller provide a simple joy that nearly compensates for the endless hours of needlework and forced conversation. Here, among the common flowers and the colourful blossoms, you can indulge in private thoughts, listen to the world quietly unravel around you, and get dirt beneath your fingernails with no witnesses except the small birds. Your mother approves, provided you avoid sun exposure and unladylike levels of strain. Your relatives pay you no mind, convinced you are performing some sort of atonement. The garden becomes your safe place, your battleground, your silent therapy session, a location where you can cultivate something beautiful or at least keep your hands busy while devising next week's clever retort for Mrs. Pennywhistle. As the day ends, you step back to observe your efforts. The planted areas look triumphant, the ground cover is suitably uniform, and your rival's favourite flowers, though still irritating, appear just slightly less self-satisfied. You wipe off your hand coverings, adjust your head covering, and go indoors, feeling a peculiar sense of victory. Gardening. Proof that sometimes the finest way to endure respectable womanhood is to cultivate deeply, plant boldly, and allow the neighbours to stew in their envy. Today's entry reads garment fitting, which is respectable language for voluntary paralysis while strangers stab you with small pointed objects. You stand upon a low platform, arms extended, while a needleworker murmurs softly about your bearing and a distant relative offers unhelpful suggestions regarding the length of your sleeves. The session continues long enough for you to reflect upon every sweet baked item you have ever consumed and wonder whether you actually like the colour a pale purple pink. Respectable garment fittings are an elaborate test of endurance, a combination of silent pain, awkward self-examination, and the constant threat of being pricked by someone with more judgments than patience. The morning begins with an atmosphere of quiet importance. You are escorted into the area for fittings, a place where time ceases and the only certainty is that someone will measure your waist and then insinuate that it might benefit from just a bit more restriction. First comes the ritual of disrobing. Layers are taken off like the skins of a very nervous vegetable. Outer covering, lower skirt, several undergarments, the fitted covering, and the restrictive undergarment itself, which, for the record, never seems to fit exactly the same way twice. Each piece is neatly folded and set aside while you try not to dwell on the cold air and hope no one comments on your inner clothing. The needleworker approaches with a container of pins secured to her arm and a demeanour that suggests we are about to ascertain how much you truly enjoy baked goods. Then the material is draped and pinned with the precision of a military exercise. The upper part is shaped, the lower portions are arranged, and lengths of material twist around you like a very decorative restraint. Your duty is to remain completely still, breathe shallowly, and fight the compulsion to scratch your nose, an irritation that only increases as the minutes slowly pass. Meanwhile, the commentary session assembles. Your mother sits nearby, offering gentle encouragement and less gentle reminders that we desire this gown to be tasteful and enduring, not designed to attract excessive notice. A relative or two wander in, helpfully contributing thoughts such as, "Have you considered wider sleeves?" or "That colour is quite daring." The needleworker sighs, pulls and pins. Her quiet remarks ranging from "The upper section is ample," translation, "You are destined for more internal support," to "We will just increase the circumference half an inch. Someone has been indulging in treats." Every fraction of your body is measured, poked, and scrutinised. You have never been more mindful of your own form. Is your posture correct? Are your upper limbs of equal length? Did you actually gain mass, or is pale purple-pink simply a merciless colour? You stare straight ahead, watching tiny particles of matter float in the light and attempting to mentally draft your next journal entry. Survived another session, lost feeling in lower left limb, may never view rich velvet the same way again. The procedure moves at an agonizingly slow rate. Every seam must be perfect, every lower edge level, every detail debated, altered, and then debated once more. If you dare to sigh or shift your weight, the needleworker sighs louder and announces, "If you are unable to stand still now, how do you expect to endure a 3-hour formal meal?" You suppress the urge to respond with optimism and comfortable footwear. The grand conclusion arrives when you are finally allowed to see yourself in the tall looking glass. There you stand, the clothing taking shape, small pointed objects catching the light. A vision of respectable refinement. At least until someone mentions that the decorative edge needs modification or the rear padding could be more pronounced. You nod as though you grasp the complexities of rear padding and attempt to disregard the profound question burning in your thoughts. Is all this truly justified for a single outdoor gathering? When you are finally released, you discard the test garments, thank the needleworker who is already scheduling your next session, and escape with a feeling of accomplishment mingled with slight distress. You are one step nearer to owning a garment that will be the envy of the neighbourhood, or at least the only one in pale purple pink. Well done. You have endured the garment fitting, a lesson in patience, posture, and the peculiar human tendency to suffer for the sake of appearance. Your residence is technically staffed, but each day presents new chances to perfect the refined practice of the discreet dissatisfaction. The container for fuel is half empty, the young male attendant's hair is slightly too current, and someone has repositioned your preferred chair 3 inches to the left, possibly as part of a domestic uprising. You channel your inner leader, deliver veiled instructions, and prepare for the next engagement in the ongoing internal conflict. Respectable households operate on a consistent supply of strict adherence, formal procedures, and subtle emotional tactics. As the mistress of the house, you are expected to keep everyone compliant, maintain immaculate standards, and achieve all of this with the kind of gentle control that implies both authority and deep reserves of tolerance, even when you possess neither. The official rule, never raise your voice. The unofficial rule, never let them observe you losing command. The daily series of minor faults begins with the morning inspection. You move through the house with the measured paces of royalty on an unscheduled visit, noticing with keen exactness every tiny particle of dirt, displaced cushion, and slightly wilted plant. The female attendant who cleans your writing surface is reliably cheerful, which makes it twice as hard to mention that the silver ink container now carries a faint scent of root vegetable. You smile, and with a voice so steady it borders on threatening, you say perhaps next time just a fraction less effort with the cleaning compound. Mary. It is a delicate display. You must never make an outright criticism, but instead employ an arsenal of vague expressions and subtle slights. The evening meal was quite distinct tonight, chef. Perhaps tomorrow something a little more traditional. Or to the young male attendant. What an impressive manner of wearing your hair, John. Is it foreign? The most powerful statement in your vocabulary is, I wonder if we might attempt it this way, which roughly translates to execute this immediately or I shall perish from embarrassment before the midday meal. And there are always strange occurrences. The container for fuel, for example, is never quite full. Is it the new kitchen help, or has the head male attendant declared a private battle on warmth? You are never entirely sure, but you offer subtle hints how chilly the drawing room feels this morning. Perhaps we could be particularly generous with the coal. The chair, inexplicably relocated, becomes the focus of a week-long inquiry as you meticulously mention to everyone within hearing distance of the perpetrator how perfectly the light in this spot suits reading. Sometimes, naturally, your efforts do not achieve the intended result. The staff, operating under their own parallel system of authority, develops silent signals for domestic defiance. The seasoning is never in the same place twice. The head female attendant insists the chair must be moved for improved air circulation. The groundskeeper mysteriously forgets to trim Mrs. Pennywhistle's side of the boundary. You issue instructions, receive indifferent confirmations, and await the next inevitably creative insurrection. Your sole defense is mastering the technique of gentle intensification. Begin with a soft reminder. Follow with a slightly more direct suggestion. When everything else is unsuccessful, you deploy the ultimate device, a visit from your mother or the religious leader. Both guaranteed to inspire sudden, miraculous improvement in standards for a minimum of 48 hours. Yet through all of this, you are also expected to be understanding, observant, and never, ever forget a date of birth or special event. You recall preferred hot drinks, inquire about ill family members, and distribute modest gifts at the winter holiday, even while quietly planning a complete restructuring of the kitchen employees. The goal is tranquility, but the reality is continuous compromise. A subtle conflict fought with silver trays and neatly folded cloth. At the conclusion of the day, you settle into your perfectly repositioned chair, contemplating your minor victories. The flames are burning, the evening meal is acceptable, and the young male attendant's hair is, well, still a bit too foreign, but you will address that tomorrow. Well done. You have survived another round of the Domestic Staff Challenge, demonstrating all the tactical brilliance of a high-ranking military officer and the patience of a saintly figure. In this environment, this is simply what is expected. So here we arrive at the conclusion of a day in a respectable woman's existence. If you navigated the restrictive undergarments, the formal visits, the garden competitions, and the daily obstacle course of social expectations, congratulations. You have survived what was essentially history's longest professional assessment with fewer quick meals and significantly more decorative stitching. It is tempting to find humour in the formal behaviour, the endless trivial talk, and the absurdity of specialised seating for distress. But the truth is, these women were expert survivors in a world where even sitting could be a test of moral integrity. They handled scrutiny with elegance, transformed tediousness into artistry, and managed to appear composed while single-handedly supporting the industry of correspondence. They were chief administrators in full skirts, representatives in elaborate headwear, and masters at pretending they were not about to collapse from the fourth layer of undergarments. So tonight, as you settle into your soft, supportive, likely non-animal fibre mattress, perhaps quietly offer thanks to the generations before you who endured strict schedules, impossible demands, and the kind of physical discomfort that would bring a modern bone specialist to tears. Be grateful for elastic waistbands, indoor plumbing systems, and the liberty to leave your residence without a head covering, or at all, because history may be awkward, inconvenient, and just a little ridiculous, but it is also proof that people are endlessly flexible, quietly strong, and occasionally extremely entertaining. Allow that thought to sink in as you drift off to sleep. You do not have to compose a note of thanks to your neighbour for the privilege of borrowing flavouring. And no one is criticising your nighttime attire. Rest peacefully knowing you have earned it without a single specialised chair for distress in sight. Good night.